Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Tomer from Applitools. We provide cloud service visual testing. For the past 6 months or so, I've been working on a new Selenium IDE alongside people at Applitools and the Selenium organization. And we're gonna talk about codeless visual testing using Selenium IDE. So, first off, I guess, every good story starts with somebody dying. So Selenium IDE, unfortunately, is no longer supported. We're gonna discuss why in a bit, but now that it's no longer supported, if anyone would like to use it to record and playback and export the recordings to test cases that you can then run in your CI, you basically have to use a Firefox version that is 4 majors behind the release. And also your website is gonna have to support that Firefox version forever. So I've got this. A friend told me you must have some sort of poetic sentence about that. But basically what happened is that the old way of writing extensions for Firefox was always filled with some security breaches or so. And every release of Firefox, they would continually fix those breaches. But eventually Chrome came up with their own idea for web extensions, the same kind of idea that stopped your browser being filled with toolbars. Basically, the idea is that we're gonna limit what an extension can do to the point that it can only serve the user and not the extension itself. So a bit technical, the previous one was called XPCOM and was deprecated in favor of web extensions. Now, the problem with that is that the Selenium IDE, the old Selenium IDE code, is basically unusable for us because it's coupled with that old mechanism of writing extensions. So we kind of had to figure out what we're gonna do next. We kind of discussed maybe we wanna write something from scratch, or I don't know, somehow be able to convert the old IDE. But eventually we came up to these people called Sidex, which are very nice people from Taiwan. And they had a working record playback tool exactly for that web extension standard that we needed. And we talked to them, and they were really nice and allowed us to use their code as a foundation for the new Selenium IDE. So basically, we had an extension that could record your behavior in websites, and then it could play it back. But we knew that that's not enough, and the old Selenium IDE provided a lot more. So when we first started, we kind of took a few points in mind that we want to ship first. So firstly, now that we are using the new standard, which is now adopted by almost all of the major browser vendors, we can just support more browsers. Firstly, we want to support Chrome, but anything else is worthwhile. We also want to be able to run it automatically in CI, just like the old Selenium IDE, because the power of it is that you can record your behavior and then run it automatically whenever your application changes. And we also want to modernize the project a bit. It's a pretty vague description of basically we want to stabilize the project and use more modern toolchain to have more contributors join us. And lastly, another great feature is the ability to have third-party plugins in Selenium IDE, which is something that we worked really hard on shipping. All right. So firstly, we needed to unify the JavaScript. Basically, we had tons of JavaScript from Selenium and from SideX and the new JavaScript that we wrote that are all incompatible with each other because JavaScript is now a highly tentative ecosystem that always changes. So we used Webpack, which basically allowed us to do exactly that. It just packs all of our JavaScript together, and that's what we ship to Chrome and Mozilla Store for you. And then we had to support more browsers. The extension naturally supported Firefox, but we knew that for the very beginning we have to support Chrome. So we forked some code for Mozilla, introduced a few tweaks to it, and we had a working extension for both Firefox and Chrome. Now, once we had the foundation going, we started looking into how we can make this tool competitive and modern and something that people would be glad to use for hours every day. So Webpack allowed us to use new tool chains like React and Mobix to design something like that. And basically, we want this tool to be as competitive as any other extension that you can buy off the market. So what's new other than the look? Firstly, we now group test cases into suites. So that means that if your test case needs to be changed, once you write that change in that specific suite, the change is going to propagate throughout all of the suites that contain it. So this way I can have a suite for my daily runs, my nightly runs that share some common logic like the user login. And if something changes in that, I only have to change it at one point, and that change is going to propagate throughout everything. Next, we wanna drop all the waiting commands, wait for element to be present, wait for page to load, because those waiting commands, they kinda represent the browser behavior of the page, that the browser have to wait, but the user doesn't actually wait, and we want the new IDE to focus on the user's behavior rather than the browser's behavior. And lastly, kind of a problem that we saw with the old Selenium IDE. It kind of had the Selenium table when you save a test case, which is nice because you can basically load that HTML and see your table. But the problem is once you started having lots of test cases and suites, you had to manage all of these disparate files in some sort of file hierarchy because then you'll get lost. So we kind of came up with our own format that would unify all that information, all of your suites and your test cases, and all of the metadata that goes with your test, and we export it into a single file that you can then load and have everything. All right. So next up, another great feature of the old Selenium IDE was the third-party plugins. Samit, the last maintainer of Selenium IDE, said he had over 1.5 million downloads for his Selenium IDE's plugins. And that's where we started to have some difficulties because since browsers worked so hard on keeping the user's privacy and security, we can't just add code from third-party vendors into the IDE. So basically, Mozilla, we called them, and basically they told us, you can't do that. You're not going to be in the store if you do something like that. And we had to figure out some way to allow third-party plugins into Selenium IDE. And eventually, we came to the realization that just like the old one, extensions are going to have to be extensions. And more than that, that's not enough. They have to play by the rules of browser vendors. They can't just share code. They can only share basic things like strings and integers between them. So we kind of had to come with some way to communicate that an extension wants to do something right now. And the idea is going to be, OK, you can do it, and wait for it. So there's exactly one way we can do that using web extensions, and that's the external messaging protocol, which basically is just a way to transfer data between extensions that you can, by the way, use to transfer code and then run it, but they're going to be pretty mad at you if you do that. So we came up with an idea that if you want to write a plugin for Selenium IDE, you would use that protocol to tell Selenium IDE, hey, I can do that. I can add this new command to you, add this new locator type for you. And then Selenium IDE would be like, oh, great. When I reach that in my test case, I'll call you, and you'll do that, and then I'll continue on what I'm doing. So that's basically the idea. And other than that, we said previously that we kind of have to support automatic runs of our test cases, because without it, it's just going to be a tool that you can open, run your playbacks on it, and then when you close it, it's over. So you always had to have someone click the play button to run your tests, and then that someone is going to have to verbally explain the results. So we knew that the thing that's going to make this IDE a tool that you can solely depend upon is if you can run reliably your test cases in CI. So we came up with a solution that is 2 steps. Firstly, just like in the old IDE, for those who are familiar with it, you're going to have a menu button to export your code to runnable code. And then you're going to install our runner for it, just like previously. You give that runner this file, and the runner will do all the magic for you. That's how it looks. And we use Jest, which is a BDD framework in JavaScript, to kind of show the results in a nice way. In this example, we have one suite with 2 test cases. They kind of do nothing but running 2 basic things, loading Chrome driver and just browsing for a little bit is like 3 seconds for both of them, which is great, I believe. And other than that, we also allow you to send all the capabilities and run on any remote that you'd like, just normally. So in this case, we just run it on Sauce Labs, the same thing, which is quite a bit longer. Anyway, what we plan for the future, firstly, we want to, right now, the way we run the test cases is just like Selenium 2, we run it on the tab under test, which gives us some kind of differences in the results between a WebDriver test, a code-based WebDriver test, and a recording. And we want to kind of mitigate that by allowing you to run through the extension using WebDriver. And another problem that is usually heard about record playback tools is that if you don't know how to write locators, if you don't know how to write locators, you basically your tests are gonna fail at some point and you're lost. And you have to know how to write code-based tests, and you have to know how to write selectors, but there are still some ways that we can mitigate that gap by taking a magnitude of selectors, and if one of them fails, we automatically fall back to another one until one of them succeeds. So how do we do? Basically, we're still not up to par on features with our predecessor, but we're committed on changing that. We do want this tool to be the best tool in the market, and any help anyone could give us, even a star on GitHub, a follow, or even a diff, would be amazing. So let's get to it. All right. So I've got Chrome right here. And that's the new IDE. Basically, it kind of has the same toolbar as the old one. You can record right here, load and save, and then you can export your code. And what we're gonna do is, basically, we're just gonna go through Wikipedia for a bit. We're gonna see that we can get to the Selenium homepage and just add an assert or something just to get the feeling. So let's just go for it. Selenium IDE. Let's look it up. Let's go here and just assert the title. Awesome. So you can see that the notifications are popping that I'm, recording things. So every test starts with an open command, just like any other one. And we kind of recorded like the behavior, and we don't have any weightings or whatnot. It's kind of streamlined to exactly what the user did. So let's just play it back. Awesome. So just for the sport, we're gonna export it to JavaScript and then run it on WebDriver. Okay. So I've got my terminal right here. We have this test. Now our runner automatically, if you don't know what Node is basically a JavaScript runtime built on top of V8, which is the engine to run JavaScript on Chrome. And if you just install Node and then through Node's package manager, you just install our runner, similarly to the HTML runner, you're all set up. You don't have to do anything more than that. And the runner automatically picks up all of your tests in the current directory, fires up Chrome driver, runs it, and reported the success. All right? Come on. All right. Awesome. So the second part of my talk, we're going to discuss about visual testing. Visual testing, it's a different kind of test than functional test. It's tests that make sure that your application renders correctly, that all of the elements are displayed as they should, that they don't overlap, they are the right size, shape, color, or any other visual impairment that shouldn't be there. So just for a second, we'll watch some examples. For example, that's the previous major of iOS and the new one. And you can see that the table's icons don't align. So that's exactly what visual test can detect for you. Another example is the Financial Times title. You can see that it kind of overflows. And that would be very hard to test using traditional functional tests. And that's Amazon homepage on the day of Prime sale, which was completely functional, but something went on with their styling, and they might have lost some sales due to that. So very quickly, how do I even do that? Firstly, you have your suite. You just make sure to take screenshots while you run your normal test. Then we compare those screenshots for you. After that, we report you the results, all the differences in your screenshots. And then you have to decide for yourself, is this difference a bug, in which case you inject that difference? Or if you worked on your application and introduced something new, then you mark that change as a positive thing, you accept it, and then the screenshots that we use to compare them are going to be updated based on that screenshot, and it's going to be used for subsequent test runs. All right. So we've discussed, I guess 10 minutes ago, about the fact that we wanted to add third-party plugins to Selenium IDE. And the first thing we did at Applitools was to design just that, add a visual testing plugin to Selenium IDE. So obviously, we're gonna use Selenium IDE to avoid writing any code. And yeah, basically I'm gonna show you a demo that I'm just gonna add a visual checkpoint to it. All right. So we're just gonna add another checkpoint to this test. What we're gonna do is, firstly, we're gonna open the Applitools extension, which lets you record different kind of checkpoints. So we're just gonna record this window and then compare it. So all I have to do, I'll get them both at front. All we have to do is press the button. We added the checkpoint right here. Now you can add multiple checkpoints, but we know without any further information to basically kind of understand the flow of your test, and you don't have to add anything else other than the fact that, okay, check this page. So let's run that again. Okay. Now it's taking a screenshot, so it's a browser screenshot, so I guess it takes time. Oh, all right. We have a failure, so we can just go to that link. Now that's Applitools eyes. Basically, you can see at the side of the tests that I've run previously, I had exactly, I already ran in advance once just to check it, but we have this one that is unresolved. We have some sort of difference between the previous one that I ran right here to this one. And if you just click on it, we can see that the pictures are changed, and we kind of have this sidebar. We can look side by side, that the sidebar is gone. Now, obviously, that's the correct version of the website, so I'm just gonna accept that. And then I'm gonna save that image to the baseline, so that image is gonna be used subsequently when I run the test again. Now, just for one moment, we had this test at work that we did on GitHub, and we have all of these differences that, if you can see, are all like the same. It's just like the GitHub logo gone. So what we can do in this mode, we have these buttons that says group images by diffs. And then if you have a diff that kind of repeats itself, for example, in this case, we changed the navbar, and that navbar is going to fail all of your tests, basically, of the tests that contain that navbar. So what we can do is we can group those differences, and then we can look at all of them together. So this one has 40 tests that failed on the same thing, and this one has 36. Now we can just look at it, and basically the logo is gone. So what we want to do, we want to reject that, because our baseline says that we need to have that logo, and basically we do need that. So we're going to reject all of them. And the other one, just 1 second. What have I done? Oh, we have to group them again. Sorry about that. The other one is the same thing, but we added something that should be there. So we're just going to accept all of them. Just see if I can get it working. Just 1 second. All right, so we already rejected all of those. we can just look at all of these ones, and you can see that in the baseline we have it in black, in this one we have it in green, and we want it to be black, so we're just gonna accept all of them, and now we're just gonna save the changes to the baseline to be used as our next iteration of the test. All right. Any questions? I was Tomer, by the way. I'm working on Selenium IDE for, if that was a misconception. My Twitter handle was taken, so I had to use a different one than what I use usually. But anyway, questions? Yeah. You can be the next one, don't worry.
Hi, the first question is, in order to Selenium IDE to be used in for commercial purposes, is it planned to have some kind of config, or for instance, to change environment URL, to pass some kind of parameters or something like that? Because without that, that's not really good for using for.
Yeah. So what I understand, if I understand correctly, you're asking how can I use Selenium IDE?
If there is a way to configure what I'm doing, to change the URI or to pass parameters or values.
All right. So Selenium IDE can be used offline if your company works in a closed environment, or you want to test a specific website that is not publicly available. You can just go ahead and change the base URL, and you can pass any during your open. You can pass any URL parameters that you want. It's just a GET request. Is that it? Did I kind of answer that?
Kind of, but I thought kind of config file where you could just put everything in a text file or something like that, so you don't have to do it via this UI form and make it more automated.
So you can do that. The file that we save for you is a JSON file that you can easily use as a configuration. It has all of the metadata of your test up top, and then it has all the switches and the test cases, and you can just configure that JSON in advance and load it into the IDE.
Yeah, and the second question regarding the image comparison feature, what happens, for instance, if you expecting to see logo or something like that, and then logo remains, but it changes to different logo. The company has changed logo. Is there a way to teach your script that this is fine, that the logo is there, it's just different, or a banner is there, but it's just a bit different, or it will fail?
All right. If there's a change to the image, then you're gonna have to teach us that the change was made. So you do that, and the test is gonna fail the first time. So if you're the one who changed the logo, you run your tests after you do that. Normally, as you would run all of your E2E tests, they're gonna fail because of that change. You're gonna accept that change, and then once you commit and push your code, then whenever your teammates are gonna run those tests, they're gonna pass. Okay. You had a question?
Hello. So I have a question regarding the image comparison. So if I have an image and then you save it, and then I put the same image but with the higher resolution, what happens?
So we have what's called a viewport. You can see right here, this one's better. You can see that we have this viewport and browser. So every test is ran according, let me just do that. Every test is run according to a single viewport and a single browser. If you change your viewport, we treat it as a new test. So this way you can test your mobile version and your desktop version, and the results are gonna be completely different. If you do, in any case, we have this command that we also added as part of the extension that is called set viewport size. And what it does, you basically give it a height against width, height times width, and we automatically scale the browser for you. Okay, the one back. Oh.
Hi, thank
Hello.
you for the speech. I have a question related to Apple tools. I see that you integrated Selenium IDE with another tool.
Yeah.
And I know that it's a commercial tool. And
Yes.
So do you have certain like 3 hours of usage of it? Or like we have to pay at the beginning of the usage? How much?
We have a free account plan that you can use. I'm not sure about the limitations of it, but the first day I came to Applitools, they told me try the product, so I didn't have my employee account. I just signed up normally as anyone else, and it just worked. So we do have a free plan for it. It's all right.
So we need to register there like separately and run our tests there. So it's like separate registration in Applitools, and I need to connect my account at Applitools to Selenium IDE, am I right?
Yeah, you in the settings, in the Chrome settings, you can right here, you just set up your Applitools API key, and we take all of that code for you. You can just look it up right here, my API key. Right
Okay,
here.
thank you. And another question relates to
just the previous one. We also, I know that we have a plan for open source project that is pretty good. If you're working on that.
Thanks. And another
yeah,
question relates to code reusage. So, have you implemented something like which allows to like use certain like amount of code and put them into functions or like certain suites and so on?
In the IDE that you can use?
Yes, in Selenium IDE.
So in the previous IDE, I know that there was a feature called rollup, which did exactly that. You would group some. It is a feature that we want to work on. We also want to work on adding your test cases, the setup and teardown stages. It's all in the roadmap that we have. We're going to publish it on the repository.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Tomer. Thank you for your report. I have a question. How much efforts will be saved on average if I just do the automation in, for instance, JavaScript, and suddenly I decided to use your tool? And the second question was actually implies from this one, if it's active code generation or passive. So can you do versa? So I have generated some code, I did some changes, and then somehow I need to have the code represented by this Selenium IDE script.
Yeah, so I guess what you mean by comparison is comparison of writing my tests using code and use the IDE. So code will always give you the most accurate results. If you can write your test with code, that's what I do, and that's how I test the IDE. But the IDE is a tool that's made for people who either don't have the time to set all the frameworks that they need to run the test, you just can do it within a minute, or for people who just are more comfortable using a GUI tool than writing code. And about the code generation, you can change the code that's being generated. But if you make a change to your test case in the IDE, you're gonna have to export it again. Any more questions? Right there at the back. Sorry to have you run the entire hall.
Hi.
Hello?
What about the tests that can be done over multiple locations, multiple service providers at the same time? And then, for example, let me give you an example. You show an Amazon example on the screen while on the slides that the style sheet was not loaded properly. That can be caused by one of the CDNs cannot able to give the response. So most of the clients will get the response and see good page, but some of the clients cannot able to get the style sheet and see a page like you show. So can this tool will be used with multiple location testing and compression between each of the tests? Like you did a test and you see you save it as a baseline, and another test that you see that the difference that is not matched the baseline. So what if this can be implemented with multi-location way? Or if you have any feature set is in place right now or not? That's what I wonder. Thanks.
So if I understand that, you mean that in the Amazon example, it was due to inconsistencies of the web page rather than a real failure, and you want to know if we can detect that in case that the local tests are run because, say, the developer runs it against localhost, and in production it runs against Amazon.com, and only 10% of the users get that error. So right now, what we would recommend is having your build server automatically run those tests for you. And if it's 10%, then yeah, you have 10% of detecting that. And it's a problem with the CDN that if the problem was really the CDN, then it might also be good to check on the CDN uptime. But you can definitely run your tests in intervals on build servers and have them report even to a different place on ICE so that it wouldn't return false positive to the development team, but rather be as a different place just for monitoring your website. Any more questions?
Hi, Tomer. Thank you for speech. As I saw, your web extension is supported by Chrome and by Firefox browsers. Yes. And is there interoperability between them? For example, if I recorded test with Chrome, I can run it with Firefox, or there I should change the at least browser version, or maybe some another difficulties can be this way.
So in terms of recording and exporting and reusing the project file across different browsers, they are completely compatible between each other. It's just that certain browsers have different, are more strict on what they allow you to do. For example, Firefox is a lot more strict than Chrome, so we can adapt ourselves to work on Firefox, and then everyone else is less strict, so it's gonna work. But for example, Firefox gives us issues with alerts sometimes, and it's either things that we can mitigate or things that you know that this thing you're gonna have to test on a less strict of a browser.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you.